Today, one of the most requested topics from you, as I talked to all of you over the last few months to discuss here at the summit, is measurement. As email's getting more integrated into the flow, as more and more is being demanded of you from all the different departments, everyone wanted to talk about how you're measuring ROI as you move into the next year, but also how you are optimizing against measurement, but also how you're attributing for email, how you're getting credit for what you're doing. So to take up that weighty topic, we're going to have both a panel and a roundtable on this today. And to lead our panel, let's bring in an old friend of ours, Allie Donovan. She's coming any second now. There you are.
It would really help if I turned myself off mute.
That's okay. Hi, Allie. How are you?
I am great. I'm so happy to be back at EIS.
Allie is a veteran of EIS. She has just moved over to a new gig over at Freshly after her last gig at Brooklyn. But before that, she has been at Fox, at Sam's Club, Total Wine, and more, both in the US and the UK. Where are you now? I know you're at Freshly, but where are you based now, Allie?
I am a stone's throw outside of New York and New Jersey. So all the New Jersey jokes.
I'm an old Jersey boy. That's where I was born and raised. I'm going to turn this topic over to you. Bring in your panel and let's get going.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to be here. I have three amazing marketers who are joining me for this panel on the next ROI calculus, which is quite a title. So first of all, we have Heather Grimstead, who is Senior Director of Global Email Marketing at The Knot. We've got Heather there, yep. Next up is Shannon Hampton, who is the Director of CRM and Email Marketing at Fracture. And then we have Erin Videro, who is Director and CRM and Email Marketing at Tech Style Fashion Group. Sorry if I mess up anyone's names there. And it looks like you're all on mute, just as a heads up. I made that mistake. But we're going to jump right into all the questions that I know everyone has for this great panel. So let's start with the big question. Why is it important that we move beyond the typical and traditional email metrics? And let's start with Heather.
Sure, yeah. So there are a couple of reasons to go beyond the traditional. One is, I think today a lot of email programs are really missing that macro view of the program. So the common metrics, open rates, click rates, even conversion rates on different goals, it's really focusing on individual messages or individual campaigns. So we just need to get a broader perspective of program health and program performance. And the second reason is I think a lot of the common metrics really miss the people aspect of the programs. So really starting to understand, like, not how messages are behaving, but how are people behaving and how many people are taking action out of your given audience, how many people are interacting with your messages.
I love taking it back to the customer journey. Shannon, you look like you've got an answer.
Yeah, so I definitely agree 100% with what Heather said. There are a ton of touch points across the customer journey, and you have to look at everything together and holistically. That should drive every action and interaction in your email program, all the way from top of funnel. Where did they come from in terms of lead source? What pages were they viewing? What were those actions that led up to them signing up to your file? All that you can use to cater and optimize your messaging and email content.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I would want to echo a lot of what Shannon and Heather both said. I think it's really important to look holistically at a customer view, as well as your email metrics and even your site conversion metrics. So looking at, LTV by customer, their repeat purchase rate, to make sure that you are, targeting them and trying to get them to take the actions that you want them to take, and that your whole email program and your multi-channel program, they're driving the results that you want, and you're creating more valuable customers.
So all three of you are in very different areas of kind of the e-com space. So if you're not focusing on the traditional metrics like emails and clicks, what are you using to measure your success?
I think we do. Well, we definitely look at the traditional metrics, of course. We're looking at that on a weekly basis with my entire team. We share out the results with our creative team because we do on that front still need to optimize to get those traditional metrics up and to make sure that we're sending relevant information to our customers. I would say when we are running different tests on different programs or different flows that we wanted to add to our email or SMS or push notification program, we are looking a lot at customer metrics. So we're looking at their conversion rate because JustFab also has a subscription component. We're often looking at cancellation and attrition rates. We're looking at the number of credits these customers are spending. We're looking at the total cash gross margin that we're driving from these customers. These are the things we're looking at that really help us to decide when we're going to roll out something new, like is this incremental or not? Are we creating better customers by rolling out these experiences?
Great. So really adding to the metrics as opposed to throwing the old guys out the window.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I would say that's true for us too. As a company in the wedding industry, we do, of course, opens, clicks, all of that. But past that, our audience is really nice and neat and defined, which is pre-wedding registrants, and people naturally roll off of it. So we've got this neat audience defined, and then we look a lot at percentages of that audience. So of that total opportunity, what percent of them have engaged in email in the last 60 days? What percent of them have reached out to a vendor in our marketplace? What percent of them have created their wedding website? And that also feeds into our segmentation and helps us understand that broader view of the program.
Awesome. And Shannon, you have a bit more of a kind of traditional retail platform with digital and non-digital channels. How does it work in that area?
Yeah, so it definitely works very similar to Erin and Heather. Fracture's a company that prints photos on glass, and both Heather and Erin touched upon key things. You have to remember that your KPIs and metrics for success may vary by your campaign. So depending on what type of campaign it is, that level of success will be different. For instance, if we're running a brand awareness campaign or a sweepstakes, right? I'm not going to necessarily be looking for conversions. I'm going to be looking for engagements, clicks, likes, versus when I am looking more bottom of funnel, and I am looking for a campaign that I need to convert, like a sale or like an abandoned cart. Yeah, I'm going to be looking at sales, bounce rate, how many people uploaded a photo but didn't complete cart. So I think that's important to consider that measurements for success will vary depending on the type of campaign you're running.
And with all of those measurements that we could do, does anybody use a model or multi-touch attribution methods to pull this all together? Let's go with Shannon.
Yes. So when you start to get into attribution, it definitely is very tricky. So like Erin, definitely looking at metrics on a weekly, even a daily basis. But we're not quite to the point where we can connect the different dots and aspects of email to the other channels. So it's kind of like we use email metrics as the main core, but then we also look at different channels that we know are affected by email. For instance, every time we send out an email, we know that direct and organic traffic goes up, right? So we can make that correlation where we are starting to develop what that attribution model can be.
I love that, taking credit for all the other channels going up as well. That's great for all emails to hear. We should totally tell everyone in the company that.
You have to.
Yeah, at Textile, we do use a multi-touch attribution model, but the key thing here is that we mostly use that for our acquisition channels and use it as something that will help inform like where we need to be spending our money and where we can adjust our strategy there. When we're looking at our CRM channels like push notifications or email, we are, for the most part, just looking at last click attribution. It doesn't really get fed into that larger attribution model because it was taking up a lot of the credit. It wasn't really helpful in determining the overall business strategy. So when we're looking at our CRM channels, we're mostly looking at last click. We have seen some interesting things there when we were mostly focusing on email and we had just, rolled out our push notification program. We were seeing some declines on email and we were like, okay, the revenue contribution is not what it was. But then we realized that we needed to do a better job at tracking what the contribution is from our push notifications. And we found out that was kind of more than making up for what the miss we were seeing in email. And so it is definitely important to look at all channels when you're looking at your reporting and consider how they interact together and what might be cannibalizing something else.
For my team on a day-to-day basis, we're using Google Analytics and using last touch attribution there. That's where we get our most precise tracking. So, campaign level, message level, down to the link level, actually in GA. In some other reporting and dashboards for the company, we're using other types of attribution, and we'll sometimes go and compare those different types. I think one attribution it's always so challenging. It seems like why can we not figure this out as an industry? But there's just not any one right answer, and it's not the same across companies either. But we recently did a campaign. We offered discounting for the first time on our stationery product. And we had GA set up as we always do in our campaigns, but we also had a promo code, which we didn't normally have. And after the campaign, we compared the transactions listed in GA versus the transactions with the promo code. And of course, we understand all the caveats of Google Analytics and the last touch attribution. But even accounting for that, the promo code showed about 3 times the number of transactions that GA showed. And that's such a huge difference that it takes a campaign from really underperforming to be a very high performing campaign. So we're actually still having discussions about that internally and trying to figure out, well, how do we manage that data? What do we do with that? And how do we get to a point where we really trust the attribution that we're seeing?
Do you think that the retention channels tend to get less attribution love just because, to use terrible words, we're either cheap or free?
That's a good question. I think that's true to a respect, because certainly we have there is more attribution around our paid channels, certainly for us. And there are a lot of dashboards and things that our business analytics team has put together, but we're also not always using the same attribution model, which, that can be a real challenge. Really important to make sure everybody's using the same thing.
Yeah, that's great advice. And for everyone here, who within your organization is creating these models or reports that you guys are using to kind of report out on? And how can our audience kind of get started with moving beyond those traditional open click metrics? Let's popcorn it to Erin first.
Sure. So we have a data analytics team that helps with a lot of our requests and make sure that we're looking at things the same way across brands. So I work on the Just Bad brand, but textile houses 4 other brands. So it's making sure they work across the brands to make sure that we're all looking at the major metrics in the same way and making sure all of there's executive alignment. So we all know what we're looking at. When it comes to CRM channel performance specifically, I partner with them to help build out our dashboards, our reporting, to make sure that we're all also on the same page in that scenario. And also been working on building out partnerships with other team members outside of our data analytics. We also have our planning team, and they have their own forecast of orders. that we're projecting to hit every month. And so I've been forging a partnership with that team to help build out our forecast for emails and push notifications, browser notifications, and SMS as well. So I think my advice would really be to work on the partnerships across teams, and to make sure that you are surfacing any questions that you have. A lot of times, there are situations that come up and I just am a little bit stuck, honestly. So I have to go to someone a little bit outside of my field to get a different perspective. And it is really helpful in the way that I've been able to look at metrics.
We need to find the digital version of donuts for the data team.
Yeah.
To keep them friendly.
Got to be really nice to them.
Let's try Heather.
Yeah, so we also rely on a business analytics team. Feel very fortunate to be able to work with that team, and they manage all of the company-wide dashboards. That team is in very hot demand in our company, so they have a really long priority list. So in addition to the dashboards that they're doing, my team also actually does a lot of custom reporting directly out of our platform. And one of the nice things about that is actually the teams end up sort of being a check for each other where the numbers overlap. So we recently had a couple of scenarios where we were running essentially the same number out of two different systems and they weren't matching. It's like, okay, if they're not 100%, but these should be pretty darn close. And that actually led us to find a couple of bugs in the data integration that were having a pretty major impact on who we were talking to. So sometimes there's checks and balances. Even if the BI team can't handle all the reporting you want them to, there can sometimes be an advantage to that.
There's definitely a common theme of different teams having different reporting, but I love the idea of them being checks and balances as opposed to fighting each other. Shannon, what's your opinion?
Yeah, so similar to what Erin and Heather said, we also have a BI and advanced analytics team, but the CRM and email team also has and maintains their own dashboards and reporting for two reasons. One, that check and balance so that we could bounce numbers off of each other to make sure that there isn't a problem and things are balancing out as they should. And two, just resource constraint, right? In the email channel, a lot of times there's lots of shifts and changes. That's the easiest channel where you can make change and see impact. So we have to be more reactive. So we have to have metrics and data at our fingertips, which is sometimes harder to turn around by our analytics team. So we really use our analytics team for more of that advanced analytics outside of those front end metrics, really helping to define segments, how are we performing across channel, and how we can optimize messaging and cadence. But I would say to those that want to get started, it's very important that you have to have your tagging structure in place, and it needs to be consistent across channel so that it's easier to gather that data together.
Awesome. So it sounds like although everyone has a data team, you all have to be super data focused and analytical so that when you're not getting that love from the data team, you're doing it yourself.
Yes.
I love it. Marketing teams going rogue. That's what I love.
All the time.
Before I ask my last question to you guys, I just want to remind everyone who is listening in that if they have a question for the panel, if you click the raise hand icon, Steve will call on you. So the last question for everyone here is, what is the most valuable piece of advice you think you can give to our audience? Let's go, Heather.
Yeah, so I think I'd kind of go back to the beginning, which is don't forget about the people behind the numbers. It's so easy to get wrapped up in conversion rates and things that it can be easy to forget that there's a person behind that number and really try to understand what the people are doing.
Love it.
Yeah, and then I would say that I guess it's similar. It's like looking at the full customer metrics and also keeping in mind incrementality. I think a lot of times as marketers, we're like, this seems like a great idea. We're going to introduce this whole new program. It's going to be awesome. But we don't always take the time to measure that. Is this extra work that we're doing? Is it effective? Is it creating the positive change that we want to see in our business? For example, when we tested our new welcome series, instead of just rolling it out, we had a holdout group that received the control experience, and then we had a test group that got the full new experience. And so we were able to look at each of these cohorts of customers to see that the new test experience was lowering our cancellation rate by 5%. So it was really exciting. So we knew that it was the right thing to do, outside of just looking at, well, it looks like people are engaging in this email series a lot more than they were before. We actually saw the positive change in the metrics that we wanted to affect.
That's great. Love when you can brag out your metrics to your broader team. And Shannon, I think you're the last.
Yes, so I would say, echoing what the ladies had said, I think it's very important to understand for your organization what that purchase lifecycle looks like, so that you can measure ROI and success very well. And what I mean for that is some campaigns, you know, you're going to see immediate impact, but there are some campaigns where you might not see immediate impact right away, and really understand how long that campaign needs to mature before you can see if it was successful or not. For example, we are running a test with MyMove to try to capture those that are moving. You know, when you move, you want to redecorate the house, and please consider fracture glass prints to decorate your home. Well, we know that statistically it takes 3 months for someone to get settled in. So when running that campaign and setting up those metrics, we know that, okay, we will not see much in the first 3 months. So just take that into consideration when you are trying to measure ROI.
Wow, that is some patience to wait 3 months. I'm always the sort of person that's there, like clicking refresh every 5 seconds on a dashboard. So you guys are amazing. But I'm going to hand this back to Steve, who I think has some questions.
Thank you, ladies, very much. We have a lengthy question, but it's about a first steps question from Cara. We have a couple of one-woman shows for our lead gen email team. We don't have an analytics team behind us, so we do everything from the content creating to reporting. What's the first step we could take to gain a new perspective in how we look at our email results? For reference, we use HubSpot and MailChimp for our email deployment. We only have as much data as those platforms will give us. So here's a challenge.
All right, I'll take this one. I also used to be a one-woman show in my previous life, also used MailChimp. So I think it takes a little bit, you can't do it all in the platform, but it is possible to run incrementality tests using something like MailChimp. So in my previous life, at a small car insurance startup, we were introducing a drip series for our for people who got a quote on our website. And so we wanted to make sure that the emails that we were sending were incremental, and we were sending them all through MailChimp. So what I ended up doing was using Excel to create my randomized group of people who had received the email and then people who wouldn't. And then once our testing period was over, I went and matched back those email addresses to people who had converted, just so we have a measure of incrementality to know that the emails that we were doing were effective. It was the steps are simple. It's a little bit time consuming because you have to go in and out of Excel all the time, and it's dependent on the size of your list. In that situation, our list was small enough that I could just easily manipulate it. But that is just an example of a way you can measure incrementality using, tools that are pretty simple.
Nice. Anybody else have another piece of advice?
I would say similar, yeah. I was also a one-woman show way back in my heyday, and yeah, Excel was my best friend. And the first thing, just to get a new perspective on email results, was to start grouping campaigns by message type, tagging them by audience, and from there, creating pivot tables to start to analyze high-level metrics. And you would be surprised just doing those short little steps, what little nuggets you'll get from the data.
Yeah, I'll echo that from both of you guys. I think sometimes we underestimate the power of Excel because there's some, there's all these new fancy tools, right? But you can get a lot in Excel if you're willing to kind of put in the time and rough your way through it. And the other thing too is I think there's a really lot of insightful information that you can get out of the basic numbers. So you don't have to get to really, fancy numbers, but even just looking at total audience, total people doing whatever action, that's something that you should be able to get out of any platform and can be really insightful in terms of how well you're leveraging the audience that you have.
Okay. Well, I hope some of you will stick around for the roundtable because I think there'll be more questions like that. Allie, team, thank you so much. It's great to see some of you back again.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Yeah.